A desolate cityscape scarred by disaster stretches under a deceptively bright sky. Footsteps echo on the deserted pavement as a lone figure walks purposefully. The woman, clad in a white hoodie and shorts, descends some steps, her expression strained. Trailing behind, a man with a backpack struggles to keep up, his voice weary as he asks how much further they must go. Her thirst gnawing at her, the woman demands water from her companion, her tone sharp with impatience. He remains silent, his back to the reader, his thoughts hidden. The woman, likely in a position of authority, scolded the bespectacled man for wasting water. He retorted sarcastically, suggesting she find more if it's so precious, reminding her of her claim of the area's safety. Taken aback, she could only utter a confused, "What?" Her expression hardened, the question turning into a sharp command. He confronted her, his voice laced with frustration at her condescending tone. Pausing, he addressed her by name, Han Yena, and unleashed his pent-up resentment at her constant demands. Finally, he challenged her to take care of her own needs, emphasizing the dire situation they were in. A furious woman loomed over a bespectacled man, her words dripping with venom. Startled, he looked up, confusion evident in his eyes as she continued her tirade, reminding him of his perceived low status in their past school days. The man listened impassively, a hint of amusement playing on his lips as she berated his lack of skills and wealth. A sly smile crept across his face as he calmly questioned her grasp of their current dire situation. He urged Han Yena to focus on the present danger, dismissing her past wealth as irrelevant in this new reality. Challenged with the label of loser, he retorted with chilling certainty, their roles now dramatically reversed in this perilous world. A man berated a woman, calling her a screaming liability and dead weight. Stunned, she could only manage a confused, "What?" Reflecting on his past submissiveness, she realized she'd never seen this aggressive side of him. He walked away, leaving her reeling. Bursting into laughter, she retorted that she didn't need him either, ordering him to get lost. He continued his ascent up the steps, his back to her, seemingly unfazed. With a dismissive gesture, she turned away, effectively ending their volatile exchange. A lone figure walked away, ignoring the taunts thrown his way. Seething with anger, the woman in shorts fumed at the perceived slight, wishing she had retaliated physically. Continuing her brisk pace, her frustration simmered, inner monologue filled with venomous thoughts. Suddenly stopping, a puzzled expression crossed her face as she took in the blocked path ahead. The barricade, bearing a stark no entry sign, halted her progress. A young woman noticed something out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of movement that sparked a question in her mind. Her eyes widened in alarm as she focused on a figure below. Standing over a body lying in a pool of blood, the woman wondered if the figure was even human. A chilling premonition, a sense of being watched, suddenly made sense. Surveying the ravaged cityscape from a rooftop, her gaze fell upon an overturned vehicle, a stark reminder of the chaos, though she was surrounded by destruction. A distinct unsettling smell hung in the air, different from the usual decay. Her expression tightened with a dawning grim realization. A bead of sweat trickled down her face, a premonition of danger tightening her chest. Blurring past, infected figures lunged at her, their desperate grasp just missing. Alone amidst the desolate cityscape, she paused, a chilling sense of foreboding washing over her. Walking down the deserted street, a lone figure's back radiated vulnerability. He stopped, a plea whispered from behind, a desperate request to join him on his perilous journey. Turning around, he faced the woman, her hopeful eyes questioning his decision. She pleaded with him again, wanting safety and companionship in the ravaged world. The woman's back is turned to a man who seems to be suggesting he'll take her somewhere, but she challenges his tone, reminding him of his earlier dismissal. He reconsiders, muttering about their shared destination of Gangnam. The man's face, framed by glasses, holds an unreadable expression. The woman's face, now visible, demands an apology. Clearly confused, she questions his motives. Facing each other again, she accuses him of a previous insult. He coldly replies that adopting a submissive attitude is key to her survival. Her jaw tightens as she processes his words. Han Yena, the queen bee of her high school, stood with an air of disdain, her privileged life a stark contrast to the ruins around her. Jung Min-jun, the bullied outcast, carried the weight of his past on his shoulders as he faced the new, terrifying reality. A zombie-like virus had ravaged Seoul, turning the bustling city into a smoky wasteland. Against all odds, these two polar opposites from the same school found themselves face to face in the ravaged streets. Now, bound by circumstance, they must rely on each other to navigate the chaotic wasteland and survive the unimaginable horrors that await. The girl, once untouchable, now looked to the boy with a flicker of fear and dependence as the first chilling sounds of the infected echoed nearby. A horde of bloodied figures lunged forward, their faces twisted in a gruesome frenzy, pursued by a glimpse of someone's dark hair. A hand, delicate yet determined, gripped another, pulling it along urgently. Amidst the chaos and despair, a thought echoed. Everything is at its worst. He ran, his glasses askew, fear etched on his face as he pulled a terrified woman along with him, desperately clinging to survival. The rooftops of a densely packed city shimmered under the morning sun. Inside a cluttered room, a figure lay asleep, their gaming setup still glowing. A persistent ringing pierced the quiet, a phone flashing 7:05 on its screen. The young man stirred, groaning and pulling the covers over his head, annoyed by the interruption. He mumbled to himself, realizing he'd fallen asleep mid-game again. Sitting up, phone in hand, a sense of weariness washed over him, and he muttered his desire to drop out of school. A young man dressed in simple clothes prepared for his day in a modest apartment. He paused at a note from his mother, a reminder of daily routines. Stepping out into the brighter light, he descended the steps of his building, a subtle seriousness on his face. He walked down the street, the towering buildings of the city looming large above him, a stark contrast to his own surroundings. His gaze drifted towards a luxurious high-rise, his expression hinting at a mix of resentment and longing as he contemplated the lives of those within. He continued his journey, the unspoken weight of his thoughts evident in his composed demeanor. A lone figure walked down a narrow street, seemingly unaware of the trouble brewing. At Seongan High School, someone cursed in pain as they hit the ground. A student in a school uniform lay sprawled on the floor, while another, seemingly apologetic, hovered over him, claiming to have held back. A witness commented on the brutality of the takedown, while another expressed amusement. The apparent aggressor, wearing a white hoodie, suddenly froze, alerted by an unexpected expletive. His expression shifted to one of disbelief as he questioned if he had heard correctly. Park Seongbin, with a smirk, mused that Jung Min-jun was getting bolder. Annoyed by the commotion in the hallway, he wondered who was causing such a ruckus. A girl, Han Yena, stood sternly, arms crossed, observing the scene. Disgusted by the display, she demanded they stop disrupting the school's peace. Two boys, roughhoused with a classmate, dismissing it as harmless fun, while another student, seemingly annoyed, intervened. He retorted defensively, pointing out the girl's own strained relationship with the teased boy. The bespectacled intervener clarified his stance, emphasizing his passive approach, which was met with further disapproval. Lost in thought, the first boy mused about the girl, Han Yena, a familiar face from middle school. He casually invited her to join him for a meeting with a friend later, but she vehemently refused, recalling a past unpleasant experience at Min-jun's dilapidated house. He internally noted Yena's affluent background, observing her family's luxurious apartment building from his own vantage point. A seemingly perfect girl, the epitome of a social media queen, posed for a selfie against the backdrop of a luxurious apartment complex. Diligent and academically gifted, she excelled in her studies, fueling rumors of an impending move to the US for further education. Beneath the flawless facade, however, lurked a disdain for those she deemed less fortunate. Her piercing gaze caught someone observing her, and she snapped irritably, only to be met with a barely concealed mocking chuckle. A flashback begins, marked by a question of when it all started. In the 8th grade, a nervous boy mustered the courage to approach a girl, asking if she lived in his direction. The girl, unimpressed, bluntly told him he smelled and demanded he stop following her. Humiliated, the boy realized with a crushing weight that Han Yena despised him, confirming his worst fear of giving off a poor smell, while ironically, he always found her scent pleasant. A young man, seemingly in a classroom setting, is captivated by the aura of wealth. He ponders his persistent feelings for a girl who has always treated him with disdain. The focus shifts to the girl, impeccably dressed and with a subtly confident smile. He grapples with the realization that his infatuation might be a sign of weakness. The scene transitions to a view outside a window, where a fire hydrant stands, stark against the urban landscape, perhaps symbolizing his vulnerability. He bitterly reflects on the physical and emotional abuse he endures from two individuals, Seongbin and Han Yena. A clenched fist suggests the protagonist's simmering frustration and helplessness. His days are now consumed by misery. Finally, he concludes that his life has become a source of shame and humiliation. A bespectacled student looms large, seemingly lost in thought. Outside the school building, three friends chat, one lamenting his waning interest in anime, while another brings up a gaming event. The conversation shifts to the allure of a Limina concert, and an offer to snag tickets is extended. Two classmates, Sunho and Byung-jun, are identified as kindred spirits, envied for their fortunate placement in a bully-free class. The initial student reappears, observing Sunho and Byung-jun with a mixture of admiration and resentment for their luck. He sighs, pondering their good fortune as he receives an invitation to the Limina concert. Lost in his thoughts, a young man wearing glasses pondered his seemingly chaotic life. He was suddenly greeted by his friend, who excitedly showed him a picture of a glamorous idol named Jian and invited him to her concert. The idol's striking image flashed on the screen, captivating with her confident pose. The bespectacled man, however, dismissed the invitation, shocking his friends with his newfound disinterest in idols. His friends expressed disbelief, questioning his sudden change of heart, specifically his abandonment of a previous fandom. Unfazed by their reactions, he nonchalantly announced his departure, leaving his stunned friends behind. Two suited figures gossiped about a hardcore fan's sudden shift in demeanor, speculating about a recent idol scandal. A lone figure walked away from them, seemingly detached and lost in thought. The gossipers continued, wondering aloud if such trivial matters could truly devastate someone, then playfully jabbed at each other's potential reactions to similar news about their own idols. Inside a classroom, a student wished for the school day to end, distracted and restless. He then muttered about an irritating glare he received earlier from a supposed communist named Kang Hakcheol. Near the lockers, another student, seemingly confident in his fighting abilities, boasted he could easily take down the shorter Hakcheol, while a friend pointed out his MMA training made any such fight unfair. Whispers spread about a North Korean defector, fueling prejudice and curiosity. A seemingly innocent question about his escape sparks a tense silence. The defector, now a student, registers the slight, his expression unreadable. A sudden outburst reveals simmering anger. The confrontation escalates as one grabs the other's jacket, the tension palpable. A furious insult hangs in the air, promising further conflict. A tense stare hinted at underlying conflict. One young man, restrained by his friends, was urged to calm down after a confrontation. A low, threatening voice advised the newcomer to keep his head down if he wanted to survive in this new school in the South. Resigned, the new student sat in class, silently fuming about the dismal surroundings. Outside, bathed in sunlight, the school building stood, a deceptive facade of normalcy. A student, fed up with his school life, decided to drop out, dreaming of a brighter future. He walked away, resolved, his mind made up. A sudden shout interrupted his thoughts, startling him. A group of intimidating figures emerged, their presence unsettling. One of them, smug and opportunistic, saw the student and devised a plan. He requested a favor, his words dripping with false camaraderie, asking the student to manipulate an elderly woman into buying them cigarettes. The student's reaction was swift and furious, cutting the bully off mid-sentence. Min-jun, frustrated and about to quit school, stewed in resentment, but walked away without confronting his tormentor. Unaware of the silent fury, Seongbin called out to Min-jun, confused by his sudden departure and blatant ignoring. Seongbin's friends mocked him for being snubbed, their laughter echoing in the street. Suddenly, in a shocking turn of events, Min-jun assaulted Seongbin, leaving him sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath. Seongbin, stunned and defeated, weakly questioned Min-jun's unexpected violent outburst. Looming over his victim, the aggressor sneered, calling him worthless trash. He contemplated ending the man's life right there, reminiscing about past beatings and how the man had grown complacent. Two onlookers, nervously watching the unfolding scene, desperately tried to dissuade the aggressor, fearing the consequences. Lying defeated on the ground, the victim pleaded for death, his spirit broken. The concerned onlookers, witnessing the grim display, exchanged worried glances, the situation becoming increasingly disturbing. Finally, overcome with rage and fueled by the tension, the victim erupted in a furious outburst, screaming curses at his tormentors. A brutal kick landed, sending someone sprawling to the ground. The attacker leaned in, his voice a chilling whisper, promising dire consequences should his victim implicate him in a suicide note. The stunned onlookers exchanged horrified glances, barely breathing as the threat hung heavy in the air. One, shaken to the core, could only whisper their disbelief at the cruelty. A pair of glasses clattered to the floor as their owner barked at the others to leave, the tension still thick enough to cut with a knife. The group slipped away, leaving the aftermath of the violent encounter behind in the deserted urban landscape, bathed in the cold light of day. A lone figure trudged up a desolate alley staircase, his back turned to the world, yearning for an end to it all. He paused, a flicker of dark resolution in his eyes, contemplating the sweet release of oblivion. His gaze lifted to the towering buildings, a dizzying precipice promising an end to his suffering. Nothing held meaning anymore, the weight of his misery crushing his will to live. His despair echoed in the empty streets as he resigned himself to a life without purpose, the bleakness consuming him entirely. A young woman, alerted, confronted a bruised young man lurking near her apartment building. Suspicious, she demanded to know what he was doing there, accusing him of trespassing. The young man, looking defeated, hesitated, his silence adding to her suspicion that he was up to no good. She pressed him, wondering if he was trying to steal something, her tone laced with disbelief. He admitted he was there for a darker purpose, claiming he wanted to die at their apartment building. Shocked, the young woman noticed the fresh wounds on his face, her initial anger replaced by concern and confusion. A bruised young man noticed another's injuries and asked if they'd been hit. The injured person remained silent, prompting the first to unleash a frustrated tirade about their passivity and lack of self-defense. He continued berating her, calling her pathetic for not fighting back against bullies like Park Seong-bin. The girl, visibly uncomfortable, turned and walked away, leaving the speaker dumbfounded. He called after her, angrily questioning her abrupt departure. Ignoring him, she continued walking, prompting a further outburst of rage and frustration from the boy left behind. A young woman in a school uniform sighs, pondering someone's pitiful weakness and vowing to scold them. A lone figure with a backpack walks down a sunny street, seemingly lost in thought. The scene shifts to a sparsely furnished room as someone enters, deciding to distract themselves with a game. He touches a power button, a flicker of resolve in his eyes, still surprised by a recent turn of events. Putting on headphones, a bruise visible on his face, he reflects on choosing life, admitting the influence of someone named Han Yena and the wisdom of her words. Free from the shackles of school, a young woman relished her newfound freedom from two particular classmates. Lost in the digital world, a young man was summoned back to reality by an impatient voice urging him to join an online game. He quickly obliged, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. Time ticked by, marked by the steady rhythm of a clock on a stark white wall. Suddenly, a chilling sound echoed, jolting him from his virtual escape. Startled, he looked up, a gasp escaping his lips as he confronted an unexpected and horrifying sight. His hands continued to fly over the keyboard, desperately trying to connect, even as dread consumed him. A gamer, engrossed in his virtual battlefield, directed his teammates. Victory declared, he abruptly announced his departure, a sudden urgency in his voice. His friend, skeptical, urged him to finish the round, but another player echoed the first gamer's hasty exit, sparking confusion. Checking the time, the now solo player realized the lateness of the hour. Another gamer, observing the news on a separate screen, spoke of chaos unfolding outside, leaving the first player bewildered and reaching for his phone. Alarmed by the news he saw, the gamer recoiled in shock. Amidst a cluttered room, a young man paused, headphones in hand, a question mark hanging over his head as he heard an unnerving sound. He cautiously moved towards the door, his apprehension growing with each echoing creak. Peering out into the dimly lit hallway, he called out, his voice betraying a hint of fear. The ominous creaking persisted, the door lock clicking open slowly, raising the hairs on the back of his neck. His breath hitched, a wave of dread washing over him as he realized the terrifying implication of the unseen presence. His face, bruised and tear-streaked, reflected the pure terror as he whispered in disbelief, the chilling realization sinking in. Something truly creepy was on the other side. A desperate plea for help echoed through the peephole, a face contorted in fear visible from the other side. Confused, the resident cautiously opened the door, only to find a bloodied and bruised figure weakly asking for help. Assuming a mistaken delivery, the resident sighed, chalking it up to the upstairs neighbor's drunken antics once again. A chilling silence fell as a trail of blood dripped down the stairwell. The resident peered through the peephole again, his expression hardening with a growing suspicion. His gaze, now filled with a chilling realization, focused on the blood-soaked steps. Finally, he concluded with weary annoyance that his troublesome neighbor was intoxicated yet again. A hand reached out, grasping the doorknob with an unsettling calmness. A man in casual clothes cautiously opened his apartment door, peering into the dimly lit hallway, a tense apprehension gripping him. A figure stumbled down a blood-splattered staircase, the air thick with a chilling silence. A young man with glasses, his face bearing fresh wounds, observed the unsettling scene with a troubled expression, suspecting drunken antics. He reached for the doorknob, a sense of unease settling over him. Stepping out of his apartment, he found a bloodied man desperately clutching at him, a look of terror etched on his face. Confused, the young man questioned the injured stranger, only to be met by a desperate plea. The horrifying realization dawned on him as he witnessed the gruesome state of the injured man. The apocalypse had arrived. A worried observer gasped, asking if the man in glasses was all right. The injured man roared in pain, his face contorted in agony. A silent question hung heavy in the air as the witness considered calling for help. Suddenly, the wounded man lunged, grabbing the other. A choked gasp escaped the shocked observer as they were violently attacked. The assailant continued his brutal assault with a guttural cry of rage. The victim cried out in terror, desperately, questioning the sudden ferocious attack. The attacker, now a terrifying figure, continued the relentless beating, leaving the other fearing for their life. The glasses-wearing man could only watch in stunned horror, his thoughts consumed by the brutal reality unfolding before him. A figure kicked open a door, revealing a grisly scene of violence. A dark, ominous presence loomed, the sounds of growls and snarls filling the air. Gasping in horror, a young man in a graphic tee stumbled back from the gruesome sight. He breathed heavily, his eyes wide with terror and shock. Trembling, he stood frozen, paralyzed by fear in the blood-splattered room. Gasping for breath, a bespectacled young man stared in bewildered horror at something unseen, questioning the reality of what he witnessed. Another young man, seemingly reacting to the first's disfigured face, stammered in shock before desperately scrambling for a phone. Kneeling on the floor, he frantically tried to call the police, a growing sense of dread creeping in. But the phone remained stubbornly silent, a chilling realization dawning on the caller as he stared at the useless device. Panic etched itself onto his face as he processed the implications of a dead phone line. Emergency alerts flooded phones, warning of terror attacks in Seoul and urging citizens to shelter in place. A young man inside his apartment, startled by the news, rushed to the window. He froze in terror, witnessing a brutal attack on the street below. A chilling scream echoed from the victim, followed by the monstrous roar of the attacker. The man, eyes wide with horror, recognized the attacker as his upstairs neighbor. He frantically called his mother, his voice filled with panic and fear, praying she was safe. His plea, "Please," hung heavy in the air, filled with desperation. A bruised and battered young man frantically tries to connect with his mother, his phone ringing uselessly in his bloodied hand. A quiet street at dusk, lit only by the glow from a few windows, hints at an unsettling emptiness. Inside a dimly lit room, a figure hides under a blanket, trembling with fear. A guttural growl emanates from beneath the covers, suggesting something monstrous is stirring. The young man, now seemingly safe inside, scrolls through his phone as the internet and mobile networks fail. Cautiously, he turns on the news, keeping the volume low, afraid of attracting unwanted attention. The television broadcasts a chilling report of nationwide serial killings attributed by the government to random terrorist attacks. The news anchor gravely reiterates the severity of the escalating crisis. A worried young man in glasses wondered about the unfolding chaos. A news report advised staying indoors amidst rising murders in Busan and other cities as authorities struggled to contain the violence. On the streets, panic erupted into a gruesome attack, hinting at something more sinister than mere riots. The man, disturbed by the news footage, realized with dawning horror that the violence resembled a zombie outbreak. He questioned the impossible speed of the spread, from Seoul to Busan in a single day, grappling with the unknown cause. Suddenly realizing his inaction, he remembered his upstairs neighbor leaving earlier, driven by a sudden urge to secure his building. He checked the stairwell, finding it eerily empty, and rushed to lock the front door. A young man cautiously peeked out of his doorway, his eyes wide with fear. He crept down the blood-splattered stairs, a chilling thought gripping his mind. His hand trembled as he reached for the door handle, whispering a warning to himself. A bloodied figure stumbled out, confirming the young man's worst fears. The wounded man lurched forward, a guttural moan escaping his lips, collapsing at the survivor's feet. A hand reached out, gripping the doorknob and pulling it open with a soft click. Stepping back inside, the young man in a graphic tee let out a sigh of relief, though his face was still etched with worry. He glanced up. The darkened stairwell, a chilling silence hanging in the air. Deciding to wait until morning, he hoped rescue would come soon. Back in his dimly lit room, he huddled under a blanket, his eyes fixed on the flickering news report playing on the television, the anchor's grim expression reflecting his own unease. A news anchor delivered breaking updates, his voice suddenly cut off by static. The television screen went blank, leaving a bespectacled young man in a white shirt staring in stunned silence. Sweat beaded on his brow as he realized even the emergency broadcast was down. A low growl echoed from somewhere unseen, causing him to shift uneasily. He lay in bed, covers rumpled, unable to sleep despite the unsettling silence. The man pondered the strangeness of it all, recalling his past despair and yearning for the world's end. Now, faced with the horrifying reality of his wish, the man found himself fighting for survival, his eyes filled with a dawning, terrifying realization. The world remained a living hell, unchanged despite the apparent shift. A faint bird song cut through the unsettling silence. Urban decay painted a grim backdrop as the survivor stirred, groaning softly. He cautiously peered through a doorway, his eyes widening at the carnage in the street below. The air hung heavy with the metallic scent of blood, a grim testament to the violence that had transpired. He knew just by sensing the atmosphere that the world had irrevocably changed. A cautious hand reached for the door. The thought, going outside now is suicide, echoing in his mind. Taking stock of his supplies, he mentally listed enough ramen, cup noodles, and rice for 2 weeks, alongside some side dishes and 3 bottles of water, noting the need to refill them. Relief washed over him as he confirmed the gas was still working, estimating a month's worth of survival with his emergency food supply. A worried frown creased his brow as he thought about his mother. Hoping for her safety, the frustration of dead phone lines and internet amplifying his anxiety. He pondered the fate of the other residents in his building, an elderly couple and a woman 2 floors up, his thoughts turning grim as he remembered the man upstairs who had become one of the infected. A sigh escaped his lips, heavy with uncertainty and dread. A worried young man with bandaged cheeks remembered the college student who lived in the rooftop unit. He recalled seeing the student with his girlfriend just yesterday, a Tuesday, their usual meeting day. A view of the rooftop apartment from above hinted at potential refuge as the young man contemplated seeking shelter there. Creeping stealthily upwards, he realized there was no sign of life in the other apartments. His thoughts focused on the rooftop guy, a sliver of hope mingled with dread that he might have met the same fate as others. Reaching the top of the stairs, the young man stared at the open rooftop door, a chilling premonition hanging in the air. A lone figure, bandaged and wary, hesitated at the rooftop door, debating whether to call out. Noticing the inner door ajar, he pushed it open, his anxiety growing. Stepping into the eerily quiet apartment, he scanned the disheveled interior, murmuring to himself that it appeared empty. A sudden rustle startled him, his eyes widening in alarm as he realized he wasn't alone. The scene shifted to a wider view of the blood-splattered room, hinting at violence. Finally, a grim caption declared that this second day of the disaster would forever alter his life. A chilling scene of bloodstains greeted someone's eyes, a grim foreshadowing of what lay ahead. Hearing a noise from within, they realized something was amiss. Cautiously, they edged towards the source of the sound. Confirming their suspicions, they prepared to face whatever awaited. Stepping out cautiously, they were met with unexpected horror. A sudden, shocking event shattered the tense silence, sending a potted plant flying. Stunned and terrified, the bespectacled man cried out in fear, his eyes wide with terror as he scrambled to escape the gruesome scene. A figure in gray pants and slippers stepped out, seemingly unaware of the danger lurking. He stumbled and fell with a startled cry, landing hard on the green ground. His eyes widened in terror as he looked up at a bloodied, menacing figure. A blood-soaked man lunged towards him, a chilling scream echoing in the air. On the rooftop, under the ominous words, "The end has come," the chase continued, the bloodied man pursuing the terrified survivor. A bloodied figure lay sprawled on the floor, a chilling testament to the unfolding chaos. He desperately clawed at the edge of a rooftop, his grip failing as blood stained the tiles below. Falling backwards through the air, the man's glasses askew, his world turned upside down in a terrifying freefall. He plummeted onto the unforgiving ground below, his body impacting with a sickening thud. A startled look flashed across the bespectacled man's face as his eyes widened in shock. A sudden heavy thud echoed, suggesting a fall. He gasped. "He fell!" Panic creeping into his voice. Someone shone a flashlight into the darkness, their breath ragged. They climbed down the stairs, each step heavy with apprehension. The man burst through a door, his eyes darting around the room frantically. He stumbled forward, collapsing onto the floor in despair, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He pressed his hands against the ground, his body trembling with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The bespectacled man's eyes widened in terror as he recognized the rooftop guy. A chilling thought crept into his mind. The rooftop guy must be dead. He grappled with a horrifying realization. Had he just taken a life? Kneeling on the floor, he shook his head, desperately denying responsibility. He justified his actions, claiming self-defense against the rooftop guy's initial attack. A lone clock ticked away in a dimly lit, empty room. The room, cluttered and ordinary, held a silent figure hunched on the floor, lost in thought. That day, the weight of guilt pressed heavily on him. He wrestled with a terrible question. Had he caused the rooftop man's death? His bare feet hit the floor as he stood, the soft thud echoing the heavy beat of his anxious heart. Blood stained the ground near a doorway, hinting at a grim encounter. A lone figure, seemingly unscathed, observed a bloodied, stumbling figure from a distance in a desolate alleyway. The injured man staggered forward, his movements suggesting he was still alive. The observer realized with a chill that the rooftop guy, though living, was no longer human. A groan escaped the wounded man's lips, confirming the observer's horrifying realization. The observer's expression hardened with the grim understanding that they were no better than zombies. A growling figure stumbled out of a doorway, leaving a trail of blood in the ominous twilight. Since that terrifying encounter, a strange calmness settled over the survivor, their fear of the infected slowly receding. The next day, under a bright, deceptively peaceful sky, 3 days into the disaster, the survivor enjoyed a simple meal, aware that this luxury would disappear when the gas inevitably ran out, pondering just when that might be. Trapped in a dimly lit half-basement, the bespectacled survivor pondered the dwindling food supplies and the seemingly endless wait for rescue. He considered the infected man on the rooftop, the only other sign of life, and contemplated venturing out again. The survivor realized that a signal fire might be his best chance at rescue, resolving to brave the outside world the next day. A sense of detached resolve settled over him, a consequence of having accepted his fate just days before. As he ascended the stairs, a sudden, violent encounter with a bloodied figure shattered the fragile peace. Frustrated, the man knelt. His phone call abruptly cut short again, yet relieved that his mother was safe. Suddenly, a flurry of messages popped up, bringing news that Sunho and Byung-sun were also safe. He scrolled through, increasingly frantic. Messages detailing air raid warnings and police mobilization, some tinged with an unsettlingly inappropriate humor. He realized that amidst the chaos, only his mother, Sunho, Byung-sun, and one other person had contacted him. His thoughts drifted to Han Yena, the closest person he knew, a memory surfacing of her visit the previous year, haunted by recent events. The young man reflected on his growing indifference to the zombie-like figures plaguing his world. He sat in his room, a quiet meal before him, seeming small and lost amidst the clutter of his belongings. A sudden buzzing broke the silence, and a look of disbelief spread across his face as he saw his mother's name on his phone screen. A young man, face etched with worry and a bandage on his cheek, frantically called out for his mother amidst the chaos of a cluttered room. He revealed his hiding place to his mother, his voice filled with anxiety. The mother, safe in a shelter near Seongnam, urged her son to stay hidden, promising to send help. Gripping the phone tightly, the son's eyes widened in fear as he started to describe the horrifying state of Seoul. His voice trailed off, the unspoken dread hanging heavy in the air as he witnessed the devastation consuming his neighborhood. He cried out again for his mother, his voice cracking with despair. Amidst a messy room littered with snack remnants and empty drinks, one friend insisted that Han Yena had genuinely seen the other on Instagram and requested an introduction. Skeptical, the man questioned if Yena knew about his girlfriend, while another wondered if she'd even show up given her reputation for tidiness. Unfazed, the first friend casually revealed he'd simply given her the address, possibly unaware it belonged to someone named Jung Min-jun. The group speculated whether Yena's arrival would confirm her as a guy chaser, their anticipation, mixed with excitement over her purportedly stunning Instagram photos. One friend slyly suggested seizing the opportunity, prompting accusations of betrayal and doubts about Yena's interest. Suddenly, a message arrived. Yena was indeed coming. Stunned, the bespectacled man scrambled to let her in, his mind reeling with disbelief. A strikingly attractive woman with long dark hair and denim shorts stepped into the doorway, a small smile playing on her lips. A young woman with long dark hair is ushered into a seemingly nice apartment. Her companion points out a young man inside, introducing him as someone she knows from Instagram. Disgusted by the stale air, sticky floors, and lingering cigarette smoke, the woman abruptly announces her intention to leave. Confused, the host questions her sudden departure. The woman vents about the state of the apartment and her annoyance at being brought to Min-jun's place without warning. Later, brooding over the woman's negative reaction, the host worries about her well-being while she sits alone in a grimy, cluttered bathroom. A woman, breathing heavily, peered around a brick corner, convinced she had heard someone nearby. Her eyes widened in fear as a guttural growl echoed from the shadows. In the next alleyway, two bloodied figures stumbled and growled, clearly not human. The woman, now terrified, bolted from her hiding spot, running straight into the path of the approaching creatures. The infected lunged, their growls turning into agonized screams as they attacked. Someone desperately pounded on a door, yelling for Jung Min-jun. A terrified woman with long dark hair pleaded with whoever was inside to answer. A man with glasses opened the door, urging the woman to hurry inside. A bespectacled, bandaged young man reacted with wide-eyed shock as he saw the woman enter. The bespectacled survivor pondered the zombie-like symptoms, hoping his friend's father, a hospital director, might hold a solution. He questioned his own concern for her, rationalizing that her wealthy family likely escaped. A faint call from outside startled him. He froze, ears straining, unsure if he'd imagined it. A desperate plea calling out a name confirmed his fears. Someone was out there. His breath hitched as he recognized the voice and flung the door open. A woman stumbled, her breath catching in ragged gasps as she fled a nightmarish scene of chaos and violence. Somewhere outside, infected people groaned and snarled, their movements jerky and aggressive. Exhausted, she collapsed, panting heavily, her face slick with sweat and fear. A man, presumably a survivor, found her huddled in a room, concern etched on his face as he checked on her. Breathing hard, she weakly questioned his presence there, her voice trembling. Suddenly, her hand shot out, gripping his shirt tightly, her expression a mixture of desperation and suspicion. He stared at her, taken aback by her unexpected action, a question mark hanging in the air. With a soft, comforting gesture, he reassured her, gently holding her hand as she continued to tremble. A trembling hand clutched at a dark shirt, the fabric taut against the wearer's back. The bespectacled young man's eyes widened in shock and confusion, a soft gasp escaping his lips as he cradled someone in his arms. He recoiled in alarm, his breath catching in his throat as he struggled to comprehend the situation unfolding around him. Overwhelmed by the perplexing scene, he wondered aloud what could have possibly happened. A man rushed to a woman's side, his voice filled with concern. She weakly questioned his presence, confusion evident in her tone. Her grip tightened on his shirt as if seeking support, a silent plea in her touch. He looked at her with wide, shocked eyes, his face streaked with tears and bandages. A strangled gasp escaped his lips, the beginning of a question hanging in the air. A disheveled young man, sporting bandages on his face, looked bewildered and terrified, clinging to a dark-haired woman. The scene shifted to a seemingly ordinary room, hinting at a recent struggle. He stammered, anxiously checking on the woman's well-being as she clutched his shirt. She gasped, her hand tightening on his clothes, her face pale. Finally, regaining her composure, the woman expressed her profound gratitude, implying he had saved her life. Overwhelmed with relief, the bespectacled young man stammered his gratitude. The dark-haired woman inquired if he was alone. He explained his mother had been missing for days since going to work. Tears welled in his eyes as he revealed he finally received a call confirming she was safe, having been evacuated by the military. The woman listened intently, her expression thoughtful. She sighed, relieved for him, admitting the news eased her own worries. Inside a cluttered room, a young man inquired about the well-being of Han Yena's parents. Yena, with a forced casualness, assured him her father was safe at work and expressed confidence in her mother's safety as well. Her hopeful facade barely concealed a flicker of worry as she then requested water, admitting to days of thirst, adding a casual request to charge her phone if the power returned. A simple meal lay on the table, untouched, a silent testament to the scarcity they faced. Outside, a clock on a weathered wall ticked away, time seeming both meaningless and precious. 3 empty plastic bottles lay discarded, emphasizing the desperate need for water. Finally, Yena gulped down the offered water, the sound echoing in the quiet room, her thirst momentarily quenched. The bespectacled survivor watched nervously as the newcomer drank deeply, worried about their dwindling water supplies. He considered the risks she must have taken to reach their boarded-up apartment. Hesitantly, he asked her name, and if she had come from her own home. Puzzled, he wondered why she had chosen their specific location. The woman, her expression carefully neutral, revealed she'd been hiding outside for 3 days. His eyes widened in surprise as she began to explain. Lost in thought, a young woman reminisced about a fateful encounter at her apartment. Having to change clothes, she briefly stepped out, unaware of the impending doom. Suddenly, chaos erupted, a scream piercing the air, and she found herself caught in a panicked stampede. Desperate to escape the terror, she sought refuge in the dimly lit stairwell of a nearby shopping center, her breath catching in her throat. Hopeless, she waited. In vain for rescue. He discovered her, shocked that she'd survived alone for so long. An unlocked door in the stairwell led to a small, empty conference room. Trapped, she hid inside, finding a single water bottle, a lifeline in her despair. This meager sustenance kept her alive until the fateful 3rd day arrived. Driven by desperate hunger and thirst, a young woman cautiously descended the stairs, hoping to find help. Startled, she froze, spotting danger in the street ahead. Sighing with resignation, she lamented her chosen path. Forced to take the secluded alleyway, she found herself hiding near a villa. Recognizing the neighborhood with a jolt, she realized she was near Jung Min-jun's house. Her internal monologue revealed that this route, however perilous, was the only way back to her apartment. With grim determination, a woman navigated a desolate street, her only path leading her closer to Jung Min-jun's house. A flicker of recollection crossed her face, recalling a previous visit as she confidently turned down a narrow alley. A young man, presumably Jung Min-jun, walked down a different street, pondering whether he should be home by now. He wondered what to call the infected, a chilling question in this new, dangerous world. Crouching low, the woman evaded a shambling, zombie-like figure, her heart pounding in her chest as she successfully reached her destination. Relieved, the man greeted her inside the boarded-up house, expressing gratitude for her bravery in venturing out. He in turn praised her courage, acknowledging the risks she took to reach him. Relieved, the woman expressed gratitude for finding someone home. She complained about her disheveled, sweaty state, wondering if the water was working. Observing her dampened clothes, the bespectacled man confirmed her discomfort and offered her a change of clothes. She paused, considering his offer. A woman, seemingly surprised, reacted to something unseen. She unleashed a furious tirade upon a cowering figure, her words dripping with contempt. Her foot pressed down on the defeated man, emphasizing her dominance. Battered and bruised, he could only whimper in pain and humiliation. Gathering himself, the defeated man weakly inquired about using the shower. The woman, her back to him, paused before granting him permission. He expressed gratitude, his voice trembling, his face bearing the marks of the recent altercation. Alone in a cluttered room, secured with makeshift barriers, he pondered his predicament, reeling from a sudden, unexpected attack. The hallway outside offered a silent, eerie escape, but his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Back in the other room, he wrestled with a new dilemma. His planned solo expedition now complicated by an unforeseen arrival. His gaze fell upon the meager supplies, enough for one person for a month, now destined to be shared, having their precious survival time. Overwhelmed, he lowered his glasses, the weight of the situation heavy on his mind. The young man was stunned, finding Han Yena showering at his house, an event as unexpected as the zombie apocalypse itself. He walked the school halls, a memory surfacing of the same aloof girl who once treated him with disdain. Their paths crossed again at school, her presence radiating an unexpected intensity. Her face, once closed off, now held a flicker of something unreadable. He whipped around, startled by a sound, confusion etched on his features. A woman asked a man named Jung Min-jun to lend her some clothes to wash her own. Startled at first, he eagerly offered various options, from t-shirts and pajama pants to shorts and long pants. She impatiently accepted anything, noting his smaller stature would likely make the clothes fit. Wrinkling her nose at the musty smell of the offered garment, she questioned if he had anything better. Flustered, he admitted he did have other clothes, but they were probably in a similar condition. Resigned, She decided to wear the musty clothes anyway. The man, resigned, endures the damp smell, waiting for his clothes to dry. A woman, seemingly insensitive, complains about the musty half-basement air. Troubled, he wonders about her character as she exits, leaving him to his thoughts. The scene shifts to a bleak, desolate cityscape, mirroring his inner turmoil. Back in the cramped apartment, freshly laundered clothes hang drying, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere. A voice calls out, interrupting the heavy silence, and the man responds with a surprised, "Huh?" A worried survivor asks the bespectacled young man what his plan was now. He suggested hiding and waiting for rescue, seemingly the only option. The young man confessed he'd been planning to leave the next day, shocking the survivor. She erupted, reminding him of the dangers they barely survived to reach this haven. He clarified he wasn't suggesting leaving now, only that it had been his plan before she arrived. Now, seeing her fear, he proposed they wait for rescue together. The survivor, though seemingly reassured, anxiously questioned what they'd do if their food ran out. Her voice was laced with dread as she pondered their future. Two survivors huddled in a room, contemplating their dwindling food supplies. The bespectacled young man suggested scavenging other apartments, though he admitted it was a risky proposition, given the eerie silence falling over the once screaming building. The woman recoiled in terror at the mere thought of venturing outside. He reminded her that she, too, had braved the outside world to reach their current sanctuary. She argued back, insisting they cross that bridge when they came to it, emphasizing the sheer terror of the infected hordes just beyond their door. She confessed near tears that her short journey to the apartment had nearly been her last. Impressed, one survivor remarked on another's ability to traverse a kilometer unscathed through a zombie-infested area. Challenged about his apparent lack of fear, the survivor with bandaged cheeks grimly acknowledged the monstrous threat. The woman with dark hair, observing the situation, compared the infected to typical zombies. Lost in thought, the bandaged survivor noted the creatures seemed to spread their infection through bites. He then confessed a chilling indifference to his own fate, claiming he had nothing left to lose. The woman in the 989 shirt turned towards him, seemingly taken aback by his bleak declaration. A desperate plea for survival echoes in a cluttered room. She vehemently refuses to succumb to the same fate as the infected, clinging to her dreams of studying abroad. The man with glasses reassures her, pointing out that she reached safety undetected, emphasizing the importance of avoiding contact with the infected. A chilling scene of infected individuals reveals varying states of aggression, some charging, some lumbering, and some eerily still. He explains that the infected aren't always fast, making avoidance possible. A sudden shift in tone as he mentions a childhood game of tag, his expression ambiguous. Her confusion is palpable as she questions, his strange analogy setting a tense and uncertain mood. The bespectacled young man, a bandage clinging to his cheek, suggested with a disturbingly cheerful air that their desperate struggle for survival was akin to a game of tag. The dark-haired woman, her expression grim, retorted that he was insane. To make light of their terrifying situation, her fear palpable, shamed, he stammered an apology, his earlier flippancy gone. Changing the subject, she requested a blanket, exhaustion etched on her face as she admitted to days of sleep deprivation. Lying on the floor, she closed her eyes, finally succumbing to the overwhelming need for rest while he watched over her. He sat cross-legged beside her, his expression sober as he contemplated her vulnerability. A neatly folded blanket lay on the floor, hinting at makeshift sleeping arrangements. The woman, arms crossed, accused the bespectacled man of trying to share her bed, her tone a mix of disbelief and outrage. He looked up, confusion evident in his expression, as she pointedly directed him to a less desirable sleeping spot. Question mark hung in the air as he processed her sharp words, before weakly protesting that it was his house. With a sigh and a slightly exasperated expression, she finally relented, accepting his awkward apology. Realizing his imposition, the man offered to sleep elsewhere. He feigned indifference, suggesting the blood-soaked stairwell as a suitable spot, but she vehemently refused. Horrified by the thought, she insisted he take the comfortable space, while her concern for his safety battled with his awkward politeness. Teasingly, he offered the kitchen as a compromise, only to have her earnestly accept, causing him to confess he was joking. The stalemate continued, leaving him trapped in a no-win situation. Alone in the offered bed, he conceded, finding solace in the simple fact of being indoors. Gratitude mixed with a hint of exasperation filled his thoughts as he acknowledged Han Yena's constant chatter. A faint groan echoed in the dimly lit room, punctuated only by the flickering candlelight. Another groan, deeper this time, followed by a low growl, suggested a restless sleep. She lay in bed, eyes open, seemingly lost in troubled thoughts. A worried frown creased her face as she murmured in discomfort. Suddenly a voice called out, startling the sleeping figure. He stirred, disoriented, questioning the interruption. A young man with bandages on his face offered a hesitant invitation. He stood by a doorway, watching another figure settle into a bed. Alone in the dim apartment, the figure huddled under a blanket near the kitchen, admitting a quiet fear. A lone candle flickered, casting long shadows in a dimly lit room. A figure stirred restlessly beneath the covers, murmuring in their sleep. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing a look of unease and confusion. A voice called out, rousing a young man lying on the floor. He lifted his head, a question mark hanging in the air above him. The man with bandages on his face looked towards the voice, concern etched on his features. Finally, he was urged to come inside and rest. Alone and afraid, a figure huddled under a blanket, the silence punctuated by their fearful thoughts. Groaning softly, the figure shifted, restless and uneasy in the dim light of the desolate room. The apocalypse had arrived, leaving Jeon Seonwook in a terrifying new reality. He awoke in bed, the chilling sounds of the stairwell still echoing in his mind. Though familiar from his time in hiding, the noise remained unnerving, a constant reminder of the danger lurking outside. Finally, a choked sob escaped him, a whisper of longing for his mother lost in the overwhelming despair. A lone figure sat huddled in a doorway, lost in thought. He stirred, his eyes snapping open, a bandage visible on his face. The world outside was a chaotic mix of sounds and sights, a grim reminder of a changed reality. From a rooftop, two figures struggled amidst the debris and bloodstains, their grunts and cries echoing in the desolate cityscape. Down below, inside a building, a figure in a numbered shirt lay sprawled on a bed, seemingly oblivious to the horrors outside. A voice filled with a strange mix of concern and impatience boomed, breaking the unsettling silence and startling the awakened figure. "How long are you going to sleep?" A concerned observer watches a sleeping girl, noting her peaceful slumber, despite her earlier fear. Time passes, marked by a clock on the wall, and the girl awakens, stretching slightly in the dim room. Confused, she notices movement and looks up to see a bespectacled young man grabbing a jacket. He pauses, catching her questioning gaze, then explains he's going to check the rooftop again. The woman, her voice sharp with anxiety, questioned the man about a previous promise regarding infected individuals. He reassured her, offering a nonchalant solution should they encounter any danger. He invited her along, but she refused, fear evident in her response. Resigned, he left her behind, venturing out alone. Ascending the stairs, he paused, a flicker of unease crossing his face. His eyes widened as he noticed a chilling detail. A cracked window pane, its fragile state hinting at impending doom. Despite the window film, the shattered glass served as a grim reminder of their vulnerability. A putrid odor filled the air, causing the hooded figure to pause, a sense of foreboding washing over him. He turned to the girl beside him, her worried expression mirroring his own unspoken fears. A creeping dread settled in his gut as he surveyed the unsettling scene. From their vantage point, the rooftop stretched out before them, offering a chilling panorama of a deserted city. Finally, he noticed something on his sleeve, a spatter of crimson, its implications too horrifying to ignore. A bespectacled young man, face etched with worry, recognized the lifeless figure as belonging to the rooftop guy's girlfriend. He observed grimly that she wasn't moving, a chilling stillness settling over the scene. A heavy silence hung in the air as he considered a short prayer for the departed. He cautiously entered a room, searching for survivors, his voice a hushed whisper. A woman with long, dark hair confirmed the presence of others, but revealed their tragic fate. She advised against entering, her tone somber, the unspoken horrors within best left undisturbed. The bespectacled young man's face reflected a deep sadness, the weight of loss evident in his downcast eyes. A young woman, seemingly lost in thought, hesitates. On a rooftop overlooking the deserted cityscape, she suggests lighting a signal, fire. But her companion points out the impracticality. He counters with the idea of preparing the fire in advance, igniting it only when they hear a helicopter. She worries about the fire catching too slowly and proposes searching nearby buildings for other survivors. Ignoring the potential danger, she yells out, desperately seeking any signs of life. Her companion expresses concern about attracting infected, but she dismisses the worry, falsely confident in their rooftop refuge. He nervously reminds her of the broken glass at the building entrance, hinting at the ever-present threat. Resigned, the narrator reveals that they were left to face the apocalypse alone. Later, inside a desolate apartment, a casual question about personality types breaks the silence, a stark contrast to their dire situation. A young man sitting on the floor admits he hasn't taken the MBTI personality test, much to the surprise of a girl lying nearby. The chatty girl, incredulous, bombards him with questions about his social media presence and hobbies, assuming he's an introvert with few followers. He reveals his enjoyment of zombie video games, a detail she finds ironically amusing given the current apocalyptic state of the world. She playfully analyzes his personality, convinced he's an introvert based on his solitary habits. He deflects her attempts to categorize him, leaving her slightly frustrated. Lost in thought, he notes her cheerful demeanor despite the impending doom, recalling her past indifference towards him. She asks for his opinion on her MBTI type, but he gives a non-committal answer. He reflects on her sudden attention, wondering if it's simply due to the lack of other social interaction in their desolate world. Despite her constant chatter, a lingering question hangs in the air. What does her newfound interest truly mean? Alone with his former crush, a young man found himself strangely detached despite the seemingly perfect opportunity. He pondered the bittersweet irony of his situation, once a dream, now tinged with the grim reality of a world on the brink of collapse. The gravity of their predicament weighed on him. Was a fleeting connection even meaningful when tomorrow might never? Come! Suddenly the girl's voice snapped him back to the present, her playful annoyance interrupting his somber reverie. Startled, he apologized, caught off guard by her sudden outburst. She teased him for his absent-mindedness, her words laced with affectionate exasperation. Days later, a woman relaxed on the floor, absorbed in a book. A sharp voice called out, demanding to know if the laundry was done and announcing their hunger. Pink-gloved hands aggressively scrubbed clothes, the sound of water splashing filling the air. The gloved figure revealed to be a sweating, determined young man, seethed with a silent vow to escape without the woman. Resentfully scrubbing clothes by hand in the dim candlelight, a young man grumbled about his demanding companion. The flickering candle illuminated a sparsely furnished room, hinting at dwindling supplies in a world without electricity. He announced his departure to a woman engrossed in a book, who, without looking up, issued a sharp warning about his return time. With a dismissive grunt, the young man shouldered his backpack and slipped out through a damaged doorway, leaving his companion to her reading in the oppressive quiet. A lone survivor cautiously scouts the deserted neighborhood, sticking to safe routes. After days of observation, he concludes the infected behave much like zombies, attacking the living but ignoring the dead and already infected. He notes they seem oblivious to him at a distance, though their awareness varies. Two infected stumble across a rooftop, unaware of the watchful eyes below. From a safe distance, the survivor studies their movements, noting their sensitivity to sound. Finally, he continues his careful patrol, mindful that the infected are less numerous during daylight hours. The infected avoid sunlight, seeking shadows and secluded areas, making nighttime excursions perilous. A lone survivor crouching amidst urban decay observes the unsettlingly familiar behavior of the infected. He recalls an online game, its virtual foes mirroring the real-life horrors he now faces. A flashback to the game shows intense combat, blurring the lines between his past and the grim present. The survivor questions whether this terrifying resemblance is mere coincidence, or if his immersion in the game somehow foreshadowed this apocalyptic reality. He grapples with the chilling possibility of a connection between the game and the infected. A sobering realization dawns. This might only be the beginning of a much larger nightmare. Under a clear sky, an ominous premonition of the apocalypse hangs in the air. Bored and restless, a young woman laments having finished all her comics. A ticking clock emphasizes her impatience as she fumes over someone named Jung Min-jun being late again. Her frustration grows, deciding that Jung Min-jun needs more discipline. The lone woman, bathed in the dim candlelight, heard the familiar whir of a helicopter and dismissed it with weary indifference. Darkness fell, and the helicopter's sound grew louder, closer. Desperate survivors, trapped on a rooftop amidst rising smoke and flames, frantically signaled for help. As the scene shifted, the woman's apathetic inner voice echoed her doubt about the effectiveness of their desperate plea. Finally, the narrow streets of a desolate city stretched towards, the sky seemingly devoid of life and hope. A clock ticked, the silence heavy with anticipation. A worried woman sat alone, gnawing her nails, cursing a certain Jung Min-jun. Growing increasingly agitated, she paced, fearing the worst had happened to him. Her anxiety escalating, she questioned if an attack by the infected was the cause of his prolonged absence. Resigned, she muttered threats of violence upon his return. Lost in thought, she plotted to restrict his future outings, even if it meant resorting to drastic measures. Finally, the sun began to set over a desolate cityscape, casting long shadows and a palpable sense of dread. A woman, seemingly alone, woke with a start in a dimly lit room. Panic etched on her face, she whispered a name, Jung Min-jun, pleading with him to be alive. As dusk settled, and the last rays of sunlight faded, a single candle flickered, casting long shadows, and the woman's fear grew, remembering warnings of increased infected after dark. A chilling thought crossed her mind. Would he ever return? Her desperate plea echoed in the empty room. "Come back quickly!" Finally, overwhelmed by terror and loneliness, she huddled on the floor, begging not to be left alone. A woman in a slip dress looks up, startled by a sudden noise. A young man bursts through the door, flustered and late. He freezes, eyes widening in surprise at the sight of her. The woman's face hardens as she angrily confronts the newcomer. Her voice cracks with emotion as she berates him for his tardiness and reckless behavior. A man, seemingly on the verge of being attacked, pleaded for a pause. He urgently presented something he'd found to a woman, explaining his tardiness was due to searching for leaflets dropped from a helicopter. The woman, initially confused by his mention of leaflets, reacted with shock and disbelief as she examined one. Her eyes widened with dawning comprehension as she realized the significance of the leaflet. He watched her, his face a mask of anxiety and anticipation.